back today. I'm going to tell you about angle grinders. What little I know. One of my subscribers said, why do you have 4 angle grinders? And I'm going to tell you why. 4 different uses. There's many uses for angle grinders. You can cut things, grind things, get into trouble, break things. A couple uses I'm going to talk about today. One is metal, one is concrete, and one is wood. So let's start with the metal. That's primary use for a lot of people. And I have different uses. This is a quick and dirty, go out and make a cut, grind something off, grind a spot weld off that I've made. A welder's scalpel right here. This obviously gets the job done in a hurry. This is a big weld. As Chris would attest, if you do a bad job of welding, you might have to pick up your grinder and just grind it out. So that's a lot of times what this is good for. Very much a workhorse. Then I have smaller, a 4 and a 5-inch grinder. Now, what I like to use these for different grits of these flop discs. And I'll show you those discs. These are called flap discs. What these are is they have different layers of sandpaper, more or less. And as they wear down, you always have fresh grit on there. And just like sanding paper, they have different grits. So I'll have like a 36 grit if I really want to take off some good material, a lot of material. And then I just start stepping it up just like sandpaper if you want to polish something. A lot of times you grind for function only, but a lot of times you want to grind and actually make something look good. For instance, if you're mitering a piece of steel together and you want to weld it and then smooth it off and paint it so you can't tell where that seam is, you'd want to use these. Now, the lower the grit, the rougher the surface is going to be when you're done, but it takes off more material in a faster way. So I put 2 different grits. I usually have a coarse grit, a 60 grit, maybe a 100 grit on each one of my 2 grinders. So one is smaller, you get up closer to a corner in a smaller area, and one is a little larger. So there's some benefit to doing that. They do a very good job of getting down flat on a surface. If you look as this wears, you can see how it's kind of disc shaped, almost like the reverse of a bowl. And what that allows you to do is when you're grinding, it wears down. You can actually have more of this surface on whatever it is you're grinding at one time, where if you have a grinder like this, just the very edge is on that surface, and that's all you're grinding. You can just put a lot of pressure on one spot. This covers more area, so it's going to clean up a wider surface. These are just the best thing I've ever found for grinding. Once I discovered these, I have a use for these, big guys, but I primarily use those for my architectural and grinding needs. Now, something about these grinders I want to tell you to look for, something that you might like to customize for yourself, is they obviously have a handle that you can remove, and you can swap them to different sizes depending if you're left-handed, right-handed, or in an awkward position. Typically, I just throw the handles away for the small ones. I'm sure it's a safety thing that they'd probably like you to have them so your hand is on it, but it's a lot easier just to get this where I want it to go if that handle's not in the way hitting something. So the other thing you look for are triggers, and these are some illustrations of it's a side trigger. So as I push in with my thumb, it's great when you're grinding, but as soon as you bump this, it pops off. Safety feature, I'm sure, so it doesn't get stuck on. But when you have your big welding gloves on, you bump that, it's always tripping it. So one feature I'm not really that excited about. Same thing with this one, it just happens to be on top, which my hand doesn't bump it as much. My thumb definitely bumps this one more often, I noticed. This one you actually have to slide on top, and it tends to stay locked pretty good, and your handle is back here farther just because the tool is so long and weighted like this. You don't tend to get your thumb up there as much. One grinder I had that I really liked was a Milwaukee, and it had like this paddle down here, little safety. You hit it with your pinky and then you just squeeze that paddle, and as long as you had a hold of it, it was on, and that was great. I really liked that trigger best of all. So those are some things about triggers you can get. Also, they have a variable speed models, and those are really handy. If you're going to do a lot of grinding, spend the money. It's not that much more. Buy a really good grinder, something that's variable speed. The reason you might want that is you might not want to throw as much material very far. You might not want to get something to get too hot. You might not want to have it get caught on something and spin. So another reason you might want a variable speed tool is because if you're a woodworker, this is an awesome tool. This is an actual Velcro sanding disc. You can just slap your regular old sandpaper on there and really go to it. These take off a lot of material very, very fast. Once you actually use this, it puts a smile on your face and a cloud of dust in the air, because it just takes the material down excellent. And you're actually can do a pretty good job of sculpting with this tool. One reason you might want to have a variable speed tool is because this thing is taking off so much material so fast, it gets hot. It'll just melt the glue on the back of your sandpaper, and little bits will start flying off, and pretty soon it'll just shoot off, because it will literally delaminate these pieces of sandpaper. So a variable speed tool can slow that down, or you can just do a little work and then let it cool for a minute, and do a little more work and let it cool. Very, very handy tool if you're a woodworker. Also, they make these in a different type of disc. This is actually designed just for sandpaper. It takes off a lot of material. It's designed with these little cooling vents in here, holes in the back. So, and little discs like on your disc brake, so that as it spins around, it lets the air travel behind the sandpaper. That's a great tool. A little bit more inconvenient. It has a little nut and a bolt here that can sort of stick up. So if you really want to get down on a flat surface and make something smooth, or a bowl, you might not want to have that little bolt sticking out. So that is a really invaluable tool. So this has two different sizes of, what do you call it, the callet. So this is for the larger discs, and if you have a smaller disc, you can turn it over and stick it inside of it. So it's really convenient to have a small, now a very small. I didn't know that when I bought this. I thought I was getting a larger size, but I actually found it to be pretty handy. Two more attachments I'd like to tell you about, of course, is just a little cutting disc. They're very thin, and if you're going to go into a spot, make a cut off something you welded on and have to redo, these little discs are tremendous. One of the best tools for cleaning up projects is this wire wheel, but it is very, very dangerous, because these things get caught in your sweatshirt, in your shirt, in your shoestrings, whatever it is you have. These things will just grab a hold of it and cause you problems. So that's how do I know these things? Because I've gotten into trouble. Now, one of my least favorite tools, but probably one of the handiest for a remodeler, is this concrete cutting diamond blade. It was one of the best investments I made. I hate it because it's a dusty tool. It's always a job that's no fun, but boy, is it effective. It cuts like butter. One hazard with this tool obviously is breathing the dust. It's in your eyes, it's everywhere. But it also gets in the brushes of your tool and all over just inside of it. So you want to blow your tool out real good when you're done. Try and clean it off. That concrete is just so gritty, it'll get in and ruin things. So that's a tool I like probably the least, but it's a great tool. I keep it around just in case. As you've watched us build the Overlander, you probably noticed I don't grind towards the camera if you ever see any shots I'm out there grinding, because those sparks will actually pit the glass. I had that experience on a window one time. I have two experiences of grinding. One, when I was about 9 years old, I was watching somebody do some grinding from quite a distance away, and somehow I got a piece of steel in my eye. I was in there for about 4 days. I kept complaining about it, and finally I went to the doctor, and sure enough, I had a piece of steel in my eye, and it actually rusted a little spot. And the doctor removed it, and yeah, I'm still here to tell about it. So that was my first experience with the grinder. I wasn't even using it. So yeah, watch other people and your dog. When I was 19, I was working for a client, and I went over with my grinder to fix something, and my sparks flew over at a window about 25-30 feet away that I just installed, and those sparks actually burned inside the glass. I didn't know that until I went to clean the glass up before I left. There were these little tiny black dots on it, and it actually pitted the glass. You can't scrape it. It's done. You ruin the glass. Now, my client was very gracious, and I was in a spot that was inconspicuous, and I learned a lesson there. And that was a long time ago. So glass is a big deal. My car, my truck, something else, just be aware of that. Hoodie, sweatshirts that people wear, it's freezing cold and they get a hoodie on. They've got those little things that hang out here. Yeah, not a good idea. So as you're watching me in our Overlander project, you'll probably see these grinders laying around, different uses, different things I use them for. And if you're building an Overlander or something, I'm sure you have one, or you're going to, maybe 2 or 3, 4, maybe 5. Now I'm sure I didn't even scratch the surface on all the different uses of angle grinders and applications. So let me know what you use yours for, something I didn't think of, another use that I could possibly pull out of these tools. And please subscribe, give us a like, and let me know what you think in the comments. Thank you.